Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar on enhancing flight school efficiency and operations. My name is Brittany. I'm with Flight Schedule Pro. I'm excited to be your host as we dive into some truly valuable insights for improving the way that flight schools operate. Today, we have the pleasure of gaining some industry knowledge from Sierra Charlie Aviation. Sierra Charlie's a Part 61 operation located in Scottsdale, Arizona. So starting off with only 2 total aircraft whenever they opened their doors in 2016, Sierra Charlie now operates with 75 members on staff in a fleet of 17 aircraft. Their operation has grown to become a national award-winning flight school over the last few years. So receiving recognition from AOPA for Best Flight Instructor in the Southwestern region, Best Flight School in the Western Pacific region, and more. So with that, I'd like to introduce Luke, who's a key figure at Sierra Charlie Aviation. Luke's been instrumental in developing innovative strategies to boost Sierra Charlie's efficiency and streamline their operations. So Luke, thanks for joining us. Can you
Thank you
start
for
by
having me.
telling us a little bit about yourself and your role at Sierra Charlie?
Thanks again for having us. We certainly love doing anything we can with FSP. You guys have been great partners with us. My name's Luke Ormsby. I'm the Aviator Program Director. So our Aviator Program is basically our career program. Kind of see over the operations for that program and kind of the overall operations for Sierra Charlie, whether it's flight operations or curriculum, whatever it could be.
So with that, as we take off into today's discussion, we'll explore the core purpose of our webinar, sharing some practical insights on optimizing flight school efficiency and operations. We'll cover a range of topics, so from minimizing wasted time and standardizing processes to taking inspiration from the airlines and leveraging advanced technology. So to kick things off, Luke, what has inspired you in Sierra Charlie Aviation to focus on improving flight school efficiency and operations?
So I think where this really started, so our owner, Scott Campbell, started the Air Flight School in 2016 with 2 airplanes, 2 like airplanes, 2 Cessna 172s with Garmin G1000. And I'm sure we all know over time, it's become increasingly more difficult to find that type of aircraft. When one comes for sale, I think it's sold within 24 to 48 hours. Wait times are what they are. I think if you bought a new 172 right now, you're 27, 28. We have orders that are going to fulfill later this year for 172s, but we ordered them 2.5 years ago. So I think really efficiency started with us just out of necessity. We have these assets, we have these airplanes. What can we get out of them? And so I think that's really where the momentum started from our owner realizing that with having 2 airplanes, trying to get more airplanes. And when we did, what can we do with them? How can we maximize these assets? And so I think that's really where it started. And we found kind of this untapped area where I think a lot of individuals don't understand how much they can get out of their airplanes. And I think we've tapped into that, realizing what some airlines do, like Southwest and whatnot, how they're able to maximize their efficiency in their airplanes.
So when we talk about efficiency in flight schools, what are some of the key areas that you believe need the most attention?
I think we can talk about a ton of different areas. Efficiency starts, whether it could be in curriculum, how we're scheduling. It could be in our aircraft. I put a lot on the airplanes because I think a lot of individuals don't see the potential that they have in their aircraft. I think a lot of us look at airplanes and go, okay, hey, we can only get X amount of hours per month out of a certain airplane, when really we could get 2 to 3 times more out of that, which means we can put more students in. But when we put those students in and we start doubling our problems per se, we need to have curriculum standardized. We need to have scheduling standardized. Otherwise, what we'll find is we just find more problems throughout the process.
Can you share some strategies that you have for minimizing that wasted time across assets like people, aircraft, and simulators that you have?
One of the biggest things that I could put a finger on, I guess, in that would be scheduling. For us, scheduling has been a key part to achieving the higher time per aircraft. It's really important that if we don't standardize that, we will not know what we get out of our airplanes. If Brittany walks in and we don't know if she's going to do a 2-hour flight or 6-hour flight today, it doesn't help us maximize efficiency. And so being able to put a number on, okay, Brittany's a private student, Luke's an instrument student, I can tell you exactly how much time you're going to do in an airplane today, helps us be able to build a schedule out that allows us to maximize the aircraft. So I think trying to standardize what does a private pilot block look like? What does a cross country look like? In lesson 46 for that cross country, it's going to be a 3.0, not a 2.5 or a 3.5, but a 3.0. Trying to put numbers around individual lessons for certificates or ratings leads to being able to maximize your efficiency in the airplanes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, in your experience, how important is it truly to standardize those processes to reduce the variation in flight schools?
Extremely important. I think as we saw, as we started to build more and more flight time in an airplane, it was tough to tell when an aircraft was going to be due for maintenance. So when you start adding more aircraft or more time into aircraft, inspections start to happen a lot faster. And we need to be able to predict when Aviator 1 or Aviator 2 is going in for an inspection. And if we can't predict that, that's going to cause a lot of inefficiency in how we book. So being able to standardize blocks where I can look at a schedule 3 days out and go, okay, Aviator 16 is going to go in for inspection because by the flights we have in it, I know it'll be timed out by then. So they all kind of play hand in hand. You can't just load up an airplane full of flights and expect everything else to run smoothly. Everything kind of needs to be in well working order in order to achieve optimal efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you mentioned taking pride in the overall product. What does it take to get there?
So I think when I started here 5 years ago, our biggest goal is trying to solve what does our product look like at the end of the day. Everything else will fall in line with that. If you don't have a good product, your customers, which for 80% of the people coming in the door are going to be the airlines. And if you can't produce a good product that the airlines want, that students are going to be able to get through training, then what's going to happen is the airlines are going to get resumes, and in a more competitive environment, which we're going into, they're going to go, okay, great. Sierra Charlie is up next for me to interview. I know what product they're getting. And that's going to either be a good thing or a bad thing or an indifferent thing until that applicant answers that question during the interview. So we take great pride in really putting a stamp on who leaves Sierra Charlie. And Sierra Charlie is not for everyone. Our dropout rate's right around 20%. And our intake is very rigorous for what we do, making sure that it's a good fit for Sierra Charlie. And we really take pride in what the product is at the end. And we kind of work backwards from that. What does it take to get there? Good syllabus. We update our syllabus once a quarter. That's a non-negotiable for us. We make sure that we're constantly improving, getting better. And we have weekly meetings to see what we can do to improve efficiencies. I don't think we're ever going to think we're the best at something. We want to constantly improve and get better, see what other flight schools do, try to look at airlines. So we looked at Southwest, and that's got our motivation for how much time we can put on airplanes. Right now, Southwest does about 290 to 300 hours per aircraft per month. They're starting to do red eyes, so I'm sure that'll increase, but that we kind of see that as a target goal for us to get to. They obviously are the best at quick turns. We try to do the same. We've got airplane keys with books. We try to do the handoff on our way between lessons. We want to try to keep airplanes in the air as much as possible.
Could you provide any other specific examples about how Sierra Charlie has successfully applied those airline strategies?
Yeah, you're probably going to this picture we have at Sierra Charlie. So I've had the pleasure of touring Southwest quite a few times. One of the very few airlines that just operates one airplane type, 737. And so we do the same. We operate Cessna 172s with the G1000. I joke like we're like Canes, we only make chicken. When I toured there multiple times, I tried to bring some of their culture that they have. Culture is a key piece of this. There's certainly a lot of flight schools, I think, that can get robotic. And, culture is a big piece of this. Students are spending a lot of money on your flight train, wherever you go. Doesn't matter what airplane you're flying, what curriculum you're doing, how big your flight school is, you're going to spend a lot of money where you're going. And so having culture be a key piece of it. So when they leave, they feel like they're taking a piece of Sierra Charlie with them. And so this is one of the quotes actually right in front of basically the CEO, COO's office. This is what sits right there. This is Gary Kelly, one of their old CEOs. And so we try to bring a lot of what they do at Southwest into Sierra Charlie, whether it's how we set up pictures around here or whatever it is, how our sims are set up. We try to bring little things like that to our environment.
Yeah, I love that. So, as we continue our exploration into enhancing flight school operations, let's kind of shift our focus to some of the most critical areas that can drive that significant improvement in efficiency. So, standardizing scheduling is crucial, right? What are the benefits
absolutely.
of the flight school controlling scheduling versus leaving it to the students?
Yeah, I know this has been a big discussion, especially amongst us, on how do we control the schedule. And I think the biggest thing for us is 80% of our students are career path oriented, and we have a deadline that we're trying to keep them on, and that's that 12 to 14 month timeline. In order to do that, you open up a lot of variation when you let the student control the schedule or the instructor control the schedule. I lose visibility on, okay, is Brittany maintaining 4 lessons a week? Is she on track? I lose visibility on that if I'm not maintaining the schedule. And so by maintaining the schedule, we'll book the schedule 4 weeks out at the best we can. And when we do that, we have visibility on cancellations. So if someone's canceling, we then need to see that we need to book another reservation. But in terms of getting someone through on a timeline, it's very crucial that we maintain that schedule, because oftentimes students, when they start flight training, they only know as much as they've read online or they've done 1 or 2 tours at Sierra Charlie. They don't understand what it takes to get their private certificate. Or if they come from another flight school and maybe doesn't have a regimented schedule like us, they don't know what it takes to get to their instrument rating in our timeline. We know that best. And so we need to put them on track to do that. And that's why we hold the schedule so close.
100%. So you had mentioned earlier in this webinar block links. What are some
Yeah.
optimal reservation block links for different stages of training, and why?
In our analysis, private commercial flights, typically a 1.7 is what is best for the student. So that's a 2-hour aircraft block. That gives enough time for free flying the airplane and putting the aircraft back on the tie downs. Anything less than a 2.0 is really tough to have optimal training in the aircraft. When you talk about taxi timeouts, possibly sitting down at the other runway, let's say that's a 0.5. We still got to get to the practice area, which could be another 0.2. Well, there's a 0.7 right there. So if we are doing a 1.1, 1.2, we're really only spending 12 to 18 minutes on maneuvers, when we want to spend at least a half hour on maneuvers to more. And so that's where we've identified that 1.7 to be a really good length 2.0 block for private and commercial. And then instrument, all of our instrument flights are cross country to build the cross country flight time. And so all those are 2.5s. We operate all those flights at night. We're in the heat here in Arizona, so we try to maximize our mornings. And for instrument students, we joke we climb to 75 degrees in the summers. And so we do that, all those flights at the nighttime to maximize those guys at night, all of our private and commercial flights during the daytime.
Yeah, gets a little toasty up there.
It does. When you get high enough and it gets late at night, it doesn't get too bad.
Yeah. How do standard operating procedures contribute to a flight school's efficiency, and what role do they play in scaling the operations?
So I know I'm at fault for this, and I'm sure there's others, but we get so ingrained with what we do. I think oftentimes we need to take a step back and realize not everybody fully understands what we're trying to do, and especially with new hires. Then you get new hires, we try to put them through this online course in this class, and I think we have this expectation that they're going to know what they're going to do first time out of the gate. And we've done a poll, and 80% of our CFIs that we've had over the years, it's their first job. So we're all not only combating this is their first job in aviation, this is their first job, period. And so areas where we've put a lot of emphasis on our indoc, trying to standardize indocs, kind of goes back to that standardization. But 2 is SOPs. So basically how I see SOPs is, if I were to ask a question, if someone were to ask me a question, I want to be able to point towards an SOP and be able to answer it. And so imagine all the questions a mechanic can answer me from an operating standpoint, a dispatcher, a flight instructor, a chief pilot, whoever it is. I want to make sure that I can provide them with a document that they can seek and answer there first before they ask me, or they ask someone in our flight department, or they ask dispatch, whoever it is. Because if I now have 30 flight instructors and they ask 10 questions a day, and now I jump to 60, that's going to double that amount of questions. It could almost triple them, because we're doing as more operations. So having SOPs and having a defined way of doing things really just helps your operation. It helps minimize those questions. And as much as you want to do that, you're still going to have questions. You're still going to have things that pop up. And I'd say we take that down from being a problem 50% of the time to 5% of the time. And we constantly are updating our SOPs to make things better. Once again, I don't think we're perfect. Southwest Airlines, all these airlines do the same thing. They're constantly updating SOPs, how things are done. One area, you put someone in an airplane and you get this POH that tells you these approach speeds and you should follow them. And a lot of people don't understand too that over time, when that aircraft door shuts, I don't know what's going on, right? I don't know what's going on. We've developed FOQA, flight deck analysis over time that gives us an insight, which will tie back to the SOPs here when I talk about in a second. But we've established approach criteria and things like that. So instructors and students blatantly know what our expectations are in the airplane. And now that we can track that in the aircraft and grade upon it and hold people accountable to that, has led to far less flat spots, which I'm sure we'd all love. We love it by bringing our approach speeds down from maybe 10 knots over where we should be to 3 to 5 knots over where we should be. When we talk about standardization, SOPs is a key function in a wide world of things that we need to do. But it's something to where I should be able to hand that to any document, anybody in my company, and they're going to be able to understand it and understand what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you discuss the importance of documented processes and how they help in maintaining that consistency as a flight school grows?
They get more and more, they become more and more important as you grow. And I think we found this out when we were smaller. So we're smaller, you walk in with a squawk and you tell us a squawk, we say, okay, we'll take care of it, go to the mechanics. That's easy to do in a small environment. When you're operating, hundreds of operations, per week, it gets a little more troubling. You need to be able to maintain things. You need to be able to track things and see commonalities. So commonalities and squawk. If we start having the same squawk over and over, that's when we need to intervene. And so documenting squawks is something we do tirelessly through Flight Schedule Pro, and we try to look for consistencies. If we see a consistency in a squawk, we go to maintenance and we say, hey, there's got to be something else here that we're missing. Documenting things like student progress is really important. Students need to know from an admin level what they're doing well and not doing well. Instructors can do that 80% of the time really well. When we get to the time where we need to intervene, that's when it's really important to document something. And I can see this happen quite a bit in students that get into something and like new students that start with us and they are coming from a career that they're brand new to aviation. And we put them with a new instructor and we see that they start falling behind. We'll pull that student instructor in and find that we just need to provide more value in certain areas, whether it's ground instruction, whether it's helping the instructor out with principles of teaching, and we document all that stuff. So if it happens a second time, we can go back to that student instructor, mostly the instructor, but also go back and say, hey, we taught you this, we showed you this, we documented this. What other services do we need to provide to help you be better in this area?
Right.
So I think as you grow, it gets more and more important in every area to make sure things are documented, from a squawk to holding an instructor or student accountable, whatever it is. Cancellations is another big one. If you're constantly sick on Saturday morning as a student, we're going to probably have a problem. It probably means that you're doing some extracurriculars. And so stuff like that, we try to just find trends. And documentation is really the only way we're going to find trends.
Yep, absolutely. So that kind of leads into the next question that I had. What role does technology and software play in enhancing that efficiency? How can schools overcome that resistance to adopting new tools?
Well, it's not easy. I think we are more on the tech side of flight schools, and we adopt new tech all the time and new betas from Flight Schedule Pro, and we break things and we find things we do well and things we don't do well. I think one of the things we've adopted is doing things in a test environment instead of just letting it go to the masses. We've got 300 students here, and to roll back something from 10 students versus 300 students is a lot different. And so I think for us, when we're doing anything with tech, we try to just roll that on a small scale and we prove that it works. Once we prove that it works, then we integrate it into our operations. And so I think with tech, that's the biggest thing you need to do, is really prove that it works for your operation, and then roll it out for everyone. I think in our age with tech, we need to constantly be improving. That's something we try to do all the time. We're adding different things here and there. We talk with you guys consistently to try to see, what can we do as an operation to constantly be more efficient, better with technology.
So you kind of touched on this not too long ago with like identifying student patterns, for example. How can
Sure.
flight schools use reporting to make more data-driven decisions?
I think the most notable right now would be on stage checks. So we're a Part 61 school. We operate basically like a 141. We use Training Hub. Everything, all of our training is documented in Training Hub. And having the ability to start to see trends within stage checks is where we can intervene at a curriculum level, we can intervene at an instructor level or a student level. A commonality would be failed ground stage checks. Typically, we see more grounds failed than flights. Students love to fly. I think we all love to fly. I think most of us, the hardest piece is ground training and trying to identify the students that, when they walk out this door, we have no control of what they do. And we can try our best to the 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and sometimes even older than that, to try to put them in the right direction. But sometimes we need to intervene and we need to catch that if we see multiple failed ground stage checks. And so that's an area where when we see the reporting come through where we see 2 failed ground stage checks, we intervene, we document that intervention, and we try to build a study plan. Our chief pilot, who's been remarkable for us, he's got 25 years in aviation, 15,000 hours in a Cessna 172. So that's pretty decent.
Yeah.
He's got a master's degree in education. He builds plans for these kids to be able to be successful. A lot of people don't know how to study. And that's where we see a lot of that go back to. They go home and they open up a book or an online course and just have no direction. And we try to provide that to help lead to the success of the student.
Now that we've discussed some of those foundational strategies for improving efficiency, I want to dive into a little bit of what's the practical tool that can significantly enhance your operations, being Flight Schedule Pro. So starting with scheduling and reporting hub, how does scheduling and reporting capabilities of Flight Schedule Pro contribute to the overall efficiency at Sierra Charlie?
I think we've dived a lot into scheduling. Scheduling is essential to being able to run an efficient operation and something Flight Schedule Pro does so well and something it increasingly gets better at. I'm sure we're going to talk about intelligent scheduling. We're the first beta tester on that, and we're very excited to continue to implement that and have it get better and better. And I think we're providing some great feedback. In terms of reporting, you have to know the data inside your flight school. You have to know things like, if I ask you, how many hours a month are your aircraft flying on average? You have to know those numbers. What's your utilization at? What is your utilization of your instructors? Not only do we utilize aircraft, we utilize instructors the same amount. What are the numbers in terms of where are your instructors at on time? That's been a big one for us. Is we've created a report that allows us to see where everyone's at in total flight time. Do I need to hire right now? Do I need to not hire? Do I need instructors? Do I not need instructors? All those decisions we want to make data-driven decisions on. We don't want to make them based off feeling. Because as we grow, we've got a lot of airplanes coming in. As we grow, and we have multiple locations, and there's a location in Chandler, I might not be there for 6 months on it. I can't make a heartfelt decision based off that. I need to make a data-driven decision. I'll have leaders down there that'll help me make some of that feeling decision. But at the end of the day, I need to make sure I'm making data-driven decisions, because sometimes I might have too many instructors. I might be asking for work, but really they have work, they have the students, they just don't know how to build their schedule correctly. And so that's where we would intervene on that. So that's why numbers are super important to make sure that you're well-versed on in your school.
Yeah, absolutely. That can make or break a flight school.
Mm-hmm. It also can open your eyes. Some
Absolutely.
people don't know those numbers, and it might be a shock to see, okay, wow, I can get way more out of this or way more out of that, which hindsight's always 20/20. So don't shoot yourself in the foot when you see it. I still see it on a daily basis. And I think, we do a good job, and I see stuff. I'm like, dude, we can do better in this area. But the only thing that we can do is today and tomorrow in the future. And that's why you constantly got to be improving.
100%. So with Billing Hub and Flight Schedule Pro's preferred merchant account, how does billing and integrated payments within Flight Schedule Pro benefit flight school operators?
So when I started here 5-6 years ago, my first task was billing. And I knew nothing really about Flight Schedule Pro at that point. I just knew I had to bill reservations, and billing happened on Square. And I remember taking hours to bill. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this. I'm copying, pasting reservation numbers. I'm pulling Excel sheets. It's probably late at night when I'm doing this. So I'm putting wrong numbers in completely by accident, maybe more or less, whatever it is. You've got now mad people calling in the next day saying, Luke charged me 1 hour extra from what it was. It becomes a huge headache and really a bad utilization of time. And so we got together and I said, there's got to be a solution for this. And I reached out to our CSM at the time, and they're like, yeah, we have Billing Hub. And I'm like, we have to do this. And Billing Hub has saved so much time. And Billing Hub, I think over the last 12 months has just gotten better and better, from packages to automated billing. Automated billing has been a huge time saver for us. So we go from Square, which is iteration one, to
Mhm.
taking tons of time. Iteration two being this, which was just, I joked we were paying someone to sit there and click a button, to the next iteration where it just runs seamlessly and we're fixing errors. There's always going to be errors, whether it's from the initial user putting wrong information in or whatever it is, a maintenance flight that didn't get marked as a non-revenue, whatever it is, there's always going to be some of those inconsistencies. But it's going to drastically decrease the amount of time we need to spend on billing, which before took a ton of time, but then it's taken less time, and hopefully we'll get it down to a very small part of time we spend in general on billing.
You're no longer the person to blame when someone gets overcharged.
Yeah, that wasn't fun. I said there's got to be a solution for this, and there was. And like I said, I think the products just got better and better. I don't think it'll ever be as bad as pulling Excel spreadsheet and doing that, because you just miss so much. And I think that's the biggest thing that I found is we miss so much billing and reservations. And that stuff adds up. If you miss a reservation a day at $200-300 a pop, I mean, that adds up, and whether
Oh,
you're a
yeah.
small or big operation. And so trying to minimize that waste and minimize that in general, because you don't want to go 2 months later and have to go talk with the student and say, hey, 2 months ago on June 1st at 10 a.m., I forgot to bill your reservation. I now need to hit you for $500. That's not
Yeah.
really fair to do to a customer. That's our fault. And so that's where this has allowed us to not have to have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up, Training Hub. Can you explain how Training Hub and Flight Schedule Pros aid in standardizing and tracking student progress for you guys?
Similar story to billing. When we started, we didn't really have a syllabus. We would say, Luke, say I'm the instructor, I'd get Brittany as a student and I'd go and instruct. And over time, we start going, okay, we need stage checks. So we added stage checks. And then we go, okay, how do we track this training? How do I know where Brittany's at in her training? How do I know where Luke's at in his training? How do I know where Mackenzie's at in her training? And without something like this, we go back to that documentation piece. Without the documentation piece, you have no idea where someone's at. And when you run a career program where you have 10, 20, 30, eventually 300 students, you need to know where people are at, because people are going to ask you questions and expect you know all the information. You're going to get a student that comes in and says, you might know who they are, might not know who they are. They walk in, you're going to ask for the last name. They're going to say, hey, I'm struggling with this in my training. You might know where they're at in training at all. If you don't have ability to pull it up with documented notes to see where they're at, it makes it really difficult to help aid them in their training or make decisions. And so this has become a key part of what we do. It's mandatory for all of our instructors and students. Nobody in here is not on a syllabus. I'm a big fan of no paper. I've brought our paper waste. Not that I don't think I'm a tree hugger. I just don't like paper. I like it all, everything in one area. If I have a laptop, I want to be able to be in Scottsdale or Hawaii or Canada or wherever. I want to be able to pull up the information, have the information. And this allows me to do that. Another big piece of this is package hours. I know we just touched on billing, but now this kind of brings billing and training together. And with package hours, we run a program where we're giving a package of hours, whether that's 80 hours, 10 hours of ground. And if you don't have that trackable, you can easily run through hours. And it's not good to be in a place where you're at 85 hours as a student. And as a school, you've billed for 80, not recognizing that you need to bill for 5 hours over. And 2 months later, you recognize this. And once again, we're having that billing conversation of having to go back and go, hey, we didn't bill these 5 hours. We need to take care of these 5 hours. And once again, that's not the student's fault. That's our fault. That's our fault from a communication standpoint. And so that's where this has allowed us to communicate to a student, here's the amount of hours you have. Here's where you're at in your training. So they're never wondering, okay, where am I at? Where am I at? How many hours do I have left? They can pull up their portal and it's right there.
Yeah, absolutely. So with Maintenance Hub, what impact has it had on improving aircraft turnaround times for CR Charlie?
So when we started our maintenance division 4 or 5 years ago, a 100-hour inspection would take us 4 days.
Oh.
And we go, there's got to be a way to make this faster. 4 days just seems like a lot of time. And I think what we found was there was a lot of inefficiencies on how we were doing maintenance. And we've got cameras in the hangar. And so we found things like mechanics not having their toolbox next to them. Mechanics were walking miles every day when they didn't need to. Put the box with the amount of tools for that inspection right next to them. And we started seeing time decrease through maintenance. And now with the amount of mechanics we have on staff, that was a key piece of it. Placing tools in a certain area, having the airplane always come to the same bay if it's that specific inspection, has allowed us to come down to, we get an airplane in the morning and it's out by the afternoon. And so we're constantly turning airplanes. We're not doing anything different on the inspection. We're still doing everything that 43 Appendix D says, everything that the Cessna recommends, pulling the seats out. We do everything we can. We got to check every box. And we're still able to do that. And we're able to track that through here. Having maintenance be able to, we use it a lot for predicting. So when we see there's 10 hours left, we can predict, okay, we need to put X amount of flights. Scheduling comes into this, and we can say, okay, maintenance, here's your schedule for the week for airplanes. And it's very rare that we have to jumble things up. We actually find that the only difficult time it is to jungle around maintenance and not have something planned out is usually around the holidays. So usually around Thanksgiving or Christmas, where you have kind of wonky operations. You're not going to get people to fly on Christmas. I'm not going to fly on Christmas. A lot of people won't, right? I think we have like one flight a year on Christmas. That usually just throws a wrench in things. 4th of July, but that's 4 or 5 events a year that we typically see that. And it's 2-3 days and we resume operations. But maintenance hub has been crucial to our efficiency and operations.
Yeah, I prefer not to fly on Christmas either.
There you go. Yeah, a lot of people don't.
Continuing our journey towards greater operational efficiency, I want to look at the future of scheduling. And you kind of touched on this a little bit with what we have coming up called intelligent scheduling. So this is a next gen feature that we have coming up that represents a significant leap forward in how we manage and optimize flight school schedules. So what does the current state of scheduling look like for you? And then how does it compare to this upcoming release of intelligent scheduling that you all have been beta testing for us?
This has been a super exciting product for us, something we've talked about, I think, for maybe 2 years. In what we do, one of the biggest things that you've probably caught on is limiting variation. And when you have students schedule, you open yourself out to a lot of variation. Okay. When you have the instructor schedule, you limit that variation because instructors want to fly ultimately. They want to get their hours, go to the airlines 90% of the time. So you're limiting the variation there. But when the school or administration takes over the schedule, you can optimize it for peak efficiency. An instructor doesn't care that we fly X amount of hours per aircraft per month. They don't care that we're utilizing our assets to 100%. They care they get their flight hours every month, which is understandable. It's our job to really understand what efficiency is at a flight school and operations level and apply that and make that throughout. So with intelligent scheduling, we see this as a crucial part of reaching peak optimization in our flight program. So with this, I think this is the only way we're going to be able to get our peak optimization. And the reason being is there's still that variation we have today where we can miss things. We can miss things with a student not flying for maybe 1 or 2 days. And that stuff adds up over time at 300 students. And so with intelligent scheduling, it gives us the ability to make sure people are flying consistently at the parameters we've set. And so through time, we've seen through the beta, it's gotten better and better. We're starting to see increased results in our efficiency. And so I think what we'll see through time is it's just going to get better and better and integrating it more and more into our operation. Kind of what I said about tech, we did it at a small scale with one class, and now it's been integrated into more and more classes. I think we've got 3 classes now on it. Now, when we get to 10, 20, 15 classes, that's when we'll really start to see, I think, peak efficiency with intelligent scheduling.
So whenever you reach that full adoption of intelligent scheduling, in what ways will that benefit both your staff and the way that you guys operate?
Yeah, so intelligent scheduling will also help us book out more effectively. Right now, or pre-intelligent scheduling, it makes it difficult at a stage checkpoint. So when I get to a stage checkpoint, that's where students tend to get lost. Because if I redo a stage check or whatever it is, you have a tendency to miss that student getting their schedule built out into the second half of their training. And so with intelligent schedule, we've noticed it's able to book the stage check and then thereafter notice, okay, they're ready to fly again and have them continue on. So that's where I think we're going to pick up a lot of the slack in missing that student. And with intelligent scheduling, it's able to really maximize, okay, Brittany needs to fly at 8 a.m. and Luke needs to fly at 10 and kind of fill those gaps in. I know that white on the schedule, we really don't like. We hate the gaps. We want to take the gaps away. And so we want to minimize all that white space in our schedule, and intelligent scheduling is going to allow us to do that.
So before we move on to questions from the audience, is there any final piece of advice or insight that you'd like to share with flight schools who are looking to improve their efficiency?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the folks on call today or others that'll see this, but one of the biggest things that I've seen talking with other flight schools as of recent is a lot of individuals don't see the capabilities that Flight Schedule Pro has. And really, it takes time. It takes time to understand, like, billing makes way more sense through Flight Scheduler Pro than it does through Square. Things like that, where you kind of just have to make the jump to get the hub, make the jump to get the training hub or the billing hub. And once you do it, you start to see you open up your time to start focusing on other things. And so you have to kind of solve those things before you want to peak optimize your aircraft. Because if you try to peak optimize your aircraft without having billing hub, you're just making the problem worse. Because now I'm shoving more to my billing department. They're going to have more things to do. So I think the biggest thing, the biggest lesson I've learned is really try to maximize the different hubs you have. And if you don't have something like billing, I highly recommend having it. I tell everyone that doesn't have it, you need to get it. Because I've been in that. I've been there. I've done the Square invoices. I've had my notes tab up, copy and pasting invoice dates. It might be a cool story to tell down the line, but you just can't efficiently run your operation, in these nitty-gritty tasks. You've got to constantly find ways to optimize and get better. And that's something that I think we do well, and I think everybody can do. Everybody's got the opportunity to do that, which is exciting.
So we have just a little bit of time remaining, so I want to open up the Q&A for a few questions. So anybody on this call, what questions do you have for Luke? If you haven't done so already, drop them into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen and we'll take a few questions. Luke, I've got one here for you. Can you show us an example of your FSP quick report that you are using to track failed ground stage checks?
So what we've done is we've worked with someone at Flight Scheduler, probably Jared, and he's helped us build a lot of these reports. I'm the last person to say that I'm the reports guy in building reports. There's some reports that I've done for sure, but there's some that just take another step in depth of knowledge. So he's helped us build some great reports, and he's helped us with that report in order to recognize that. One of the other key areas where we see that is we require all stage check notes to be sent to us. And in that, it's a form we've created essentially. In that also reports to us what attempt it is. And so we kind of see it in two different areas. One's an email to me. That one in particular is an email to me. And the other one is report inside Flight Scheduler Pro. So really, it's a prompt. That's all I'm looking is get prompted. When I get prompted, then I look into someone and investigate further, see where they're at in training, and go from there.
How do you practically schedule 4 weeks out with people's changing schedules and other issues that come up?
So it depends. If you're a career program and you set the expectation that they are a career program student, this is your school, this is your job. If you set that expectation, then it makes it more simple to do that. We think of it as, hey, you're coming here to become a pilot. We're building out your schedule in order to do that. For the businessmen and women, it gets very difficult. And so that is increasingly less and less of our business because it's harder to serve those students that we can't put on what we think is a path to success. When someone comes in and they want to get their certificate for fun, we set the expectation, hey, here's how we think you can do this efficiently and effectively. And if as a custom student, you can do more or less reservations, that's great. But we set the expectations you're a custom student. And it might cost you a little bit more, might cost you a little bit less. But as a career program, you're paying a certain amount to come in. And with that amount, this is how we can get you done in that time in budget.
How do you make sure instructor time is not getting lost pre and post flight when the aircraft needs to be checked in for the next reservation?
Yeah, so this was a huge, huge issue until Flight Scheduler Pro solved it. I apologize. Brittany's going to know the name better than I do on what this feature is. But I know Scott Campbell, our owner, I think he was the brains behind it. Maybe not. Him and Nick Ginther have probably talked about this since the start of the business. But there is a feature to where I can check out the instructor and the aircraft separately. And that was a huge, huge update for us that we absolutely loved, and allows us to track, when is someone checking out as with the student? And not just the airplane, but with the student. When are they checking in? When are they checking the aircraft out? It allows us to see when people are late. It allows us to see when people are late coming back. And so I forget that feature. Brittany's going to have to bring that one up, but it's set up for all of our activity types to where when you check out the first time, it just checks out the instructor and students. So they brief. Then they check out the aircraft when they go out to the airplane, check in the airplane at the airplane. And then when they get back, they debrief and they check in the whole reservation.
Yep. It's called pre and post briefing in your settings. So
there you go. I love that feature.
There you go. So let us know if you need help setting that up. What key metrics do you look at daily, weekly, monthly to make sure that your operation is on track?
A lot. One of the biggest things that we've learned is getting the data correct is really important. So making sure the numbers aren't lying to you. I know how funny that sounds, but sometimes you can look at the wrong information. And I think we also don't want paralysis by analysis as well, which is easy to do. Some of the key metrics that we want to look at are what are our maintenance times? So from a maintenance perspective, how long is it taking us to turn out maintenance? Are we getting behind on certain maintenance? Where are we looking on squawks? So are we seeing an uptick of certain squawks? We saw that when we got 6 new airplanes back in 2020. We saw a lot of alternator squawks. And so that's when we went to the manufacturer and said, hey, we're seeing a lot of these inconsistencies. So maintenance squawks is one big one. Students can't fly when airplanes sit on the ground, and a school can't operate when airplanes sit on the ground. So we want to minimize that time, and that's an area we spend a lot of time on, is looking for consistencies, and that's a metric we look at. Making sure our students and instructors are flying optimally. So making sure that students are flying here a minimum of 4 days a week. If someone's falling behind, we call student progress meetings on that. Making sure instructors are flying consistently as well. We have a goal for them to be, as much as we want them to stay forever. I know as an instructor gets through their training, they get better and better, which is awesome for us. But at the end of the day, we know their goal is to probably go to a charter, go to a 135, go to a 121 operation. And so making sure that we keep them consistent so that we can move them through their timeline. And so we track the metrics on how often are instructors flying, how often are students flying. Those are just some of the key metrics we look at a daily basis.
Are these reports some that you made personally, or are they found in Flight Schedule Pro?
Mainly, we do a lot of customization on reports. We'll take reports that you guys have given us and customize them. That flight operations dashboard's been really good to see month-to-month comparisons. That's been really good to see trends. Obviously, it's hot in the summer, and we see a little bit of a decline in the summer. It's hot. And then we see certain months that we do better versus other months. And so flight operations dashboard has been actually really nice to see some of those trends just quickly. I can pull it up and I can see those trends. I don't need to run certain custom reports or anything like that. So those are nice to see just from a glance.
So the last question that we will take is, how do you manage instructors and aircraft being available at the same time when different lessons have different lengths?
Mainly our business is career program. Okay. So when we give Brittany 3 instrument students, I know that means that in one day, she could fly 7.5 hours if she wanted to, right? 2.5 to 1.5. So I know she can fly up to 7.5 hours. If I look at a month, average one of our career program students flies about 30 hours a month. So when I do the math, I can give an instructor 90 hours. And so in that, I know that I only need to give that instructor really 3 students. So I know the instructor's covered from that perspective. Now, when I look at aircraft, I think you have to kind of start with that to see where you're at. You kind of have to, it's tough to just give you a numeric answer on this. You have to really standardize that to see what you're missing on the schedule. Our airplanes, we don't like sitting on the ground. And so we don't have off times for airplanes or operations. And so that really gives us the capability to where if you want to fly as an instructor, you have access to an airplane. There shouldn't be ever time where we don't have access to an airplane. If we don't have access to an airplane, we're going to look at aircraft utilization. Okay, our utilization is peak right now. We can't get more out of this airplane. And if that's the case, then we got to find more assets. But I don't think that's typically the problem. I think typically the problem is we need to standardize what's going on in the reservations. When we do that, we can give instructors the optimal amount of students, because it happens to where an instructor goes, I need more students. I don't have enough work. And you look at their block and they've got 9 students. And you're like, okay, wait, there's something missing here. Whether students aren't flying enough, and if students aren't flying enough, it's not good for the student. And so I'd say to look there first. And then once that's built up, you're going to see your schedule build up. And that's when your schedule starts building up. You need to start optimizing the schedule, your maintenance, your aircraft, in order to make that a seamless operation.
So as we wrap up this webinar, I just wanted to quickly highlight some key points that Luke's covered about ways to improve flight school efficiency and operations. So 1, focus on efficiency across assets, right? You want to identify and reduce those inefficiencies related to people, aircraft, simulators. Use those data-driven approaches to ensure that your aircraft are used effectively, and then also implement those standardized procedures so that you can reduce the variation, improve overall consistency. 2, learn from the airlines. This is probably something not a lot of people think about, but it's right there in front of you.
One of the best quotes for that I've heard that stuck with me probably this whole time, and why we do this is the phrase success leaves clues. And obviously there's a lot of success at the airlines. There's a lot of things they do well and don't do well, but it sure does leave clues and something we can bring to even our level of aviation.
So optimize scheduling and those standard operating procedures. So you want to control the scheduling within the school to reduce those conflicts and inefficiencies in the schedule. Document and standardize those procedures to maintain that consistency as your school grows. And then use the technology and software that's available for you to streamline operations and make the data-driven decisions. Then lastly, but certainly not the most least, utilize Flight Schedule Pro. Benefit from integrating all the features that we offer within our platform, like billing and payments, training hub, maintenance hub, to improve that efficiency and track progress. Our upcoming next gen release that I had mentioned earlier, it's a release that promises to further enhance efficiency by reducing that human variation and optimizing operations. So we hope today's insights will inspire you to evaluate your own flight ops, make those impactful changes. Just remember that continuous improvement is key to staying competitive and providing the best possible training environment for your students. Just want to thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Luke, for spending time with us today and providing all that valuable insight. If you guys have any more questions or need further information on things that you heard during this webinar, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, have a great day and best of luck with your journey towards greater efficiency and excellence in flight training.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.